Hussain and you are watching The Coffee Table. And did you know that the 23rd of April is World Book and Copyright Day? I bet you didn't, but now you do. And we like nothing better on The Coffee Table to talk about books and talk to the people who write the books and who publish the books and who read the books, which is all of us. That is really wonderful. And what I find really exciting about World Book Day, that is on the 23rd of April, because 23rd of April is the day that Shakespeare and Cervantes both died. A little morbid, but the point is that World Book Day aims to celebrate reading around the world. It aims to celebrate the culture of book reading, and by book reading we mean an exchange of knowledge and ideas across languages and across minds and across borders. And you know, all the stuff that they say about books being magic, it's all true. It's all very true. So today I am so excited to be talking to two wonderful people who are deeply involved in the business of writing and publishing books. And I'm so happy to be welcoming back on the show our dear friend Mehr Hussain, who is a journalist. She is a publisher with the imprint Zuka Books. She's the author of Pakistan Fashionable History, which is Pakistan's first coffee table fashion book that chronicles the sort of growth of the industry over the past few decades. Mehr also runs a social enterprise, Zuka Accessories. And we are also joined by Nida Usman Chaudhary, who is a diversity and inclusion advocate. She's the founder of the Lahore Education and Research Network and the Women in Law Initiative Pakistan. And more to the point, Mehr and Nida are two of the several founding members of the Authors Alliance of Pakistan. Yay! Welcome to the show, ladies all. I'm very excited, as you can see, to be having this wonderful conversation. So Nida, I want to sort of begin at the beginning, and World Book Day is actually kind of bifurcated into World Book and Copyright Day. So why do we have books and copyrights in the same sentence?
Thank you so much, Mina, for inviting us to the show and for giving us an opportunity to talk about this very important topic, which is very close to our heart. Books and copyrights go hand in hand because you know, without copyrights, you will not have the entitlement or the protection that you need to secure your intellectual property. And these are the rights that the law recognizes and attaches value to your work. So basically, when you have copyrights over your intellectual work, it means that you have a bundle of rights that you can go and enforce in a court of law.
Okay.
You can sell them, you can license them. So you can deal with your work and, you know, earn money from it. So the economic value that comes to your intellectual property, that is all because of the regulation of copyrights and the fact that copyrights exist. Without this, of course, we understand that piracy and plagiarism will be on the rise. So copyrights actually, books without copyrights would basically not be able to safeguard the or protect the interest of the people who are working so hard to produce intellectual property.
No, absolutely. To me, it sounds like then if you don't have a copyright for your book or for whatever your creative thing that you've done, your intellectual property, is defenseless in the world. And anybody can just take it and claim it for their own. So when we talk about intellectual property, now again, this is something that I feel like a lot of people don't understand very clearly. So could you explain a little bit in, you know, sort of from a lawyer's perspective about what constitutes somebody's intellectual property?
Okay, so intellectual property is essentially, it refers to the creations of the mind. So whether that's an invention, whether that's your literary or artistic work, or whether that's designs and symbols or a computer software that you end up writing or a film that you end up producing. So it's basically intellectual properties like any other property. For example, you have your phone or your car or your other assets, which are tangible property. By extending that analogy of ownership to the works that you create as a result of, you know, exercising your mind or your creative abilities, it basically gives that legal cover and protection that if somebody steals your phone from you, for example, and you would have a cause of action, that's exactly what, you know, intellectual property, because property denotes the concept of ownership. And when you have ownership over something, it means that, you know, it's your entitlement, which is capable of being protected under a court of of law or through the law enforcement agencies.
Quite
so it's
right.
very important to have that, and it's very important to also understand that it's not the fact of registration that creates your copyrights in your work. The registration is a mere evidence that can sort of help your case when you need to go and protect it or sell it or deal with it in any way. The actual point in which where your copyrights actually vest in you is the moment that you create them. So when you put pen to paper, that's the moment you have your copyrights vested in the writing that you produce. That's the point that people often miss out, and they feel that okay, if they're not registered, they might not have the protection, but that's not true. Of course, registration helps. But the minute you put your pen to paper, or you come up with a music tune and you actually record that tune, that's the moment. So the minute you create it, you have your rights to it.
Yeah, but then registration helps because then that kind of solidifies your claim to your work, and it's sort of like then you have proof to say that this was your original idea and that it belongs to you.
I mean, that's the role that registration plays, but the right is not created at the moment or at the time of registration, because sometimes registration even takes up to 11 months to 1 year from the time that you actually start the process. So it's actually the time that you create your work or bring it into existence. That's the moment you are guaranteed protection. But of course, registration takes that a step forward, and it's not just for enforcing your rights. It's also when you want to sell them. If you have the paperwork or the necessary title to it evidenced in the registration, then it's easier to sort of sell it to a third person or to license it off to another person who may want to use your work and credit you for it, of course.
Yes, quite right. And credit is crucial here, and that's something I want to kind of cycle back to. But hi, Mehr, can you hear me?
Hello, Mina. I can hear you clearly.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having me back on the show.
Delighted
Good to be here.
Yes,
again.
Indeed, albeit from a distance. So, Mehr, what I understand from what Nida has shared with us is that when we talk of intellectual property, we're basically looking at any kind of idea. So while we take certain ideas seriously, for example, the copyright on, let's say, a computer program, or the copyright or a machine, or some kind of technology or a scientific process, usually that's considered seriously and taken seriously, and those copyrights are pursued actively. But when we look at creative work of the artistic kind, so let's say, music, a song, a poem, a piece of writing, a book, photography, nobody seems to consider that in that same seriousness. And why do you think that is?
That's an excellent question, Mina, and a very, very important one. Thank you for asking that. The base answer is that there is zero respect, zero regard for the law. As Nida has painstakingly explained, the process of registration takes up to 11 months, and then you have to start another process for your copyright of your work. Now,
okay, so they're two separate things.
They're two separate things, absolutely. And they're very important that people actually get it done. But even if people do get it done, what happens is that there is zero awareness about the existence of these laws. There is zero awareness or even respect of the law and then across the spectrum, and especially when it comes to the creation of art. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that art is not given much value. It's just seen as public property. The minute you put it out there, especially in this digital realm, it's seen as public property, and people just claim an ownership of it. And we've seen that happen in several spheres of art. We've seen it happen with literature, where pirated books are sold, even though they're copyrighted, they have ISBN numbers, but they're printed and they're resold, and the estates don't even know about it. The estates who own the original work. We've seen it in digital art. The most famous example that comes to my mind is when Shezal, a graphic designer, Shezal Malik, when she put her art out there, a major organization picked up that art and started selling it as their own design. And then even in the music sphere, I mean, music is probably the most abused form of art in the country, unfortunately. And that all comes down to lack of respect for the artists and for their work, and the awareness that people are now waking up to this. An example of this is Quadrum. a Pakistani percussionist band. They released the national anthem, which they had done in an original composition using just drums for, I think it was Pakistan Day or 14th August. That song by Quadrum has been used and featured and played without any permission from the band. Now, what's happening here is that they've actually turned around and held people to account, whoever's used it. And I think that's very important because we are a young nation and people are becoming aware of these rights, these laws, and they should be told, they should be encouraged to hold those entities to account for why they're utilizing their art. It's very important for people to understand that things are changing. You cannot use and abuse people's art for your own personal gain without giving credit or even securing permission.
Yes.
There is awareness happening. The damage has been done, but at least people are now becoming aware.
Yeah. So, Nida, correct me if I'm wrong, but that does mean that we do have copyright laws in place. It's just a matter of enforcing those laws and making sure that people take those laws seriously, and there is redress for wronged parties as well. Like Quadrum, for example, does have recourse to the law to sort of get credit and to get royalties and whatever they're owed for misuse of their property.
Absolutely. Like with everything else in this country, we have the law for everything, but there's been weak implementation. And of course, the accountability factor, it has to come from the person whose rights have been aggrieved. And sometimes that entire process is so lopsided and cumbersome, and it has its own issues that people have not really had the strength to, take it up in the system. But like Mehr said, that's changing now. And I think social media has got a lot to do with how these dynamics are changing, because now people can call you out and, it's just more awareness through those channels as well. So I think that has also given more confidence to people. But yes, in terms of remedies, there are both criminal and civil remedies available. So you can actually have all the infringed copies taken out from distribution. You can have access to them. You can have them burned if you would like. So the law is very much
destroy them.
If you want to, you can claim damages. You can claim, that you be credited. Like, it's a very creative law, much like, how it caters to the creative work. So the law is also very creative, and it allows you a lot of options. And then on the criminal side also, you can actually fine the person who's, infringing your copyright, and there's also possibility of putting the person behind the bars. But again, the whole issue is the fact that implementation and the whole access to justice itself is so it has its own challenges for the person that it ends up not being a very viable or a feasible option. But social media is definitely a force to reckon with, and I think that is helping the whole and people like Shezil have really mainstreamed the idea that you can't just take anything away, and so I'm happy to see that the younger generation is definitely more on to securing and holding people accountable for violating their rights. So I think that's a great trend. And I mean, if you want me to tell you the law, it's the Copyright Ordinance 1962. It's a very elaborate law and gives you a lot of powers and options that you can
No, that's excellent.
Whatever suits you.
Yes. And I think that accountability is an important term here, because when you hold people accountable, you are also securing the value of your work. And Mehr, as a publisher, is this a question? I know it's a question that comes up a lot, especially with in relation to piracy, is that a lot of people say that, and you talked about how books are pirated and the estates don't know and they don't get any benefits from the author's work and the selling of it whatsoever. But a lot of people talk about how, and I'm just talking about book piracy here because the example doesn't apply to art, for example, is that it's a question of access, and people can't afford to buy books produced the legal way or the right way, which is why they're happy to then buy a pirated copy, because they're like, well, we couldn't have had it else.
Absolutely. It's a double-edged sword then, isn't it? People want to read books, but unfortunately the economics of it, kicks in. And yes, books are expensive and people are not able to buy them as regularly or as many as they want, quantitatively. But I think that's not piracy and stealing intellectual work or reprinting books is not the solution. This is where civil society should really take action. They should hold the state to account for the lack of libraries, the lack of public spaces for reading, the lack of our education system lacking in terms of inclusion of books.
Yes.
Literature, works of literature. Yes, of course, you have your textbooks and your notebooks and everything, but you see, people need more than that.
Yes.
The world isn't just maths and science and that's it. There's a lot more to it. There's literature, there's poetry, there's prose, there's so much more. And I think that civil society should definitely hold at least their local areas. For example, Model Town in Lahore has a Model Town library, and the society, the Model Town Society, is very active about it. You see, you have to find solutions, right? And it's such a shame because World Book Day, World Copyright Day, the whole idea behind it is so lovely. It's got a Catalonian legend to it, where it is celebrated on St. George's Day. And the idea was, I'm so glad you brought up Shakespeare and Cervantes' deaths, as sad as they are. It was during the 1920s that a Catalonian bookseller noted that April 23rd, which was St. George's Day, which is known as the Day of the Rose, the Day of the Lovers, was also the day when both these writers had died. And so he decided that a book would be the perfect gift to be given in exchange for the rose, in exchange for love, a book for love, and love for books. And so when I see piracy happening, you have to understand that this is not you showing your love for books, but this is actually supporting a criminal act.
Yes.
And if you want... And if you
no, but it sounds so serious. It is serious. And I know that Nida has her lawyer hat on, but we have to take a very quick break here. Stay with us. We'll be back in a flash. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the coffee table and this fascinating, absorbing conversation we're having about World Book Day with author and publisher Mehr Hussain and lawyer and author Nida Chaudhary, who both of them have also founded the Authors Alliance. We're going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. But before the break, we were talking about how World Book Day is sort of like Valentine's Day for book lovers, which I love. I love that idea. Like, books are better than roses. Many times. But we were talking about book piracy and how it's a sort of, and like Mehr said, there's like a double-edged sword where on the one hand you really want to read, but on the other hand you are stealing somebody's property in order to do that. So that's not the right kind of love. And I know that Nida wanted to say something about that, so go Nida.
Yeah, absolutely agree with how Mehr has actually phrased it, and the lack of libraries and the lack of investment in this from the government's end is why the books are expensive in the first place.
Yes.
So I just wanted to put it out there that, if price is the concern, that the government needs to, realizing the demand for books and reading and realizing that, Pakistani people want to also tell their stories and contribute and, take a positive image of this country outside. Yeah. So then the government needs to have that market access open. They need to have policies and, investment in place that can make the paper that, that you use for publishing much cheaper. They can subsidize it. There are so many other ways to support this industry. Yes. And we don't see that coming. So the justification for providing access to books cannot be that, okay, you end up, committing crimes or you end up going around stealing other people's work. So I just want to add that we don't see that kind of support coming from the government. But we do see that a lot of people in their own private capacities have these book clubs and book sharing sort of platforms. And it's very interesting to see how people have in their own circles, in their own private, smaller circles. And there also are streets where they would leave their books for others to read, or we've seen little khokas and, places where people would leave books for others to read. So these are the kind of initiatives that show that, there is that love for reading. And so public libraries probably need to be revisited. So, I mean, a lot can be done to inculcate these, these practices and take them forward, so that everyone does have that equitable access. And Copyright Day and World Book Day is also about that. It's not just about the rights of the people who hold these rights. It's also about ensuring that there is access to books and to reading material. And Mehr gave a very, very good example of that you exchange books. And so, a lot can be done, but you need to stop stealing because that's also causing damage to your economy, your GDP. You're not being able
absolutely. And it becomes a kind of vicious cycle where you are not respecting the value of a creative endeavor. Then by piracy, authors don't get paid. And when they don't get paid, how will they keep writing and producing more things that we want to read? So it has to be a kind of a back and forth and an exchange where our buying books the right way keeps authors in pocket and allows them to keep doing what they're doing and incentivize other people to also start writing or making art or making music. And it's really interesting because with UNESCO and with World Book Day, and I was reading the website, and it talks about how for them, World Book Day is a celebration of creativity, diversity, and an equal access to knowledge. And I think that's what we're talking about here when we talk about libraries, for example. And it's a sort of three-pronged stakeholder approach for UNESCO, at least, because libraries is one huge part of an equal access to knowledge, but so are publishers and booksellers. And I feel like Mehr, as a publisher and as somebody who has been, selling your books and putting out these wonderful works into the kind of reading ether, how do you feel about the sort of relationship between, let's say, publishing and book selling?
I think one of the things that we need to understand is when it comes to publishing in Pakistan is that this is a wasteland right now. There is immense potential for us to publish local writers, create a local industry, and that means that we will have work that will not be as expensive as, say, imported books, as fantastic as they are. In order for us to call the shots, so to speak, when it comes to everything that Nida has mentioned, we need to actively start doing groundwork. We need to actively start advocating for our writers to come forth, for local publishers to emerge, and to create models that are sustainable. Why has our publishing industry failed, and why has that fueled piracy? It is because of it's pure economics, Mina. At the end of the day, it comes down to the business model. If your publishers are not doing justice to the written work being produced by local writers, then yes, piracy will happen, because then you're creating that opportunity. And yes, writers will stop writing or producing work because they're not getting, there's no monetary value, as Nida had mentioned earlier as well. So ultimately, it comes down to actually setting up, creating a model that works in everyone's benefit. I think the responsibility lies with the publisher. As a publisher, if you are not doing justice to the work that you have in your hands, that somebody is entrusting you, and you're not adding monetary value to it for the client and for the author, then I should be held responsible for frankly speaking, screwing up, really.
Yeah.
Ultimately, publishing, piracy, copyright, it rests with the publisher. And there are ways to protect yourself as a publisher as well. Nida mentioned the law. If I'm going to a printer, all my printers are given non-disclosure agreements. I'm not interested, dosti hai, are we sister, brother, are we friends? I'm sorry. You're printing one of my author's works, you are going to be handed an NDA. By all means, take it to a lawyer, get it verified, get it whatever it is, but you have been handed a legal document. And if I see my work anywhere else, going straight to court.
Yeah. And that happens. That happens a lot. And if we can't have that relationship of trust, how can we sort of keep that mechanism going? So, and I now want to finally come to the Authors Alliance, which both of you and other writers like Awais Khan and Sara Naveed set up together. So, Nida, what is Authors Alliance Pakistan, and what do you guys do?
Well, last year on 23rd of April itself, we were talking about, copyrights, and all of us were together in that panel. And we were talking about the newly imposed book ban in Pakistan, through which, with India was stopped, and so many other books were banned under the, garb of ideology or whatever. So a lot of writers are facing a lot of challenges, and also the newer challenges in shape of PDF leaks, right, online, and through WhatsApp. So all of that was, part of our conversation. We realized that, independently, Mehr was also, talking about it on Twitter. Avais was raising his own concerns. I was obviously from the legal aspect, talking about it, that the ban, why is it against fundamental rights and all of that. And then we decided, and we realized that, all of us are talking about it individually, and it's not doing enough justice to the cause. So we decided to sort of come together as a collective voice for the promotion and protection of, copyrights and other rights of the authors, such as, their right to access newer markets, and to not have their books banned for frivolous reasons and all. And so because of course, this is a time where collective platforms are very, very popular. They're on the rise. We've seen it in Aurat March. We've seen it through other progressive students collectives. So
yes.
why not?
Everybody is always stronger together. Absolutely, everybody is stronger together. So, Mehr, does Authors Alliance have certain sort of goals in mind right now in terms of support for authors? Like, what do you think are the most kind of pressing issues that creative people are facing these days?
I think with Authors Alliance, what I would really like to do, first of all, it was an initiative taken by Nida, and I have to give her credit for it, because yes, while I had been ranting and raving away on social media, yes, I think Nida was the one who said that, look, we need to take more constructive action. Yeah. And so that's when Authors Alliance was coming into being. And one of the things that struck us was how all of us have some tragic story or the other to share. So instead of
Which is terrible. I'm chuckling, but this is a travesty that everybody's experienced some breach of trust, some breach of copyright, something that is deeply unsettling and even sort of really hurtful also.
It really is sad, and I think that that's what I would want to place Authors Alliance as, a collective that young writers are able to turn to and look up to, and not look up to, but sort of have a comfort zone where they can talk about their experience of the publishing industry. We can advise them, we can give them information, we can guide them so that they don't have to suffer the same way we did. Yeah. That's something that we're all very united in, that nobody should have to go through what we did. Yeah. And I think we got away with whatever we did because of our established networks within Pakistan and abroad. Otherwise, when I look at the younger lot, young fresh students, for example, coming out who are keen on getting their work published, and I keep thinking they're so, they're savvy, they're brilliant, but at the same time, they don't know how rough this market is, how awful things can get. And I would love for Authors Alliance to be a place where they can come to and educate themselves with what our experiences and what our knowledge has to offer, and make better decisions, make informed decisions, so that their work is not ruined or harmed in the way that our work was.
Absolutely. And it's still, I feel like writing in Pakistan, and particularly writing in English in Pakistan, is still a nascent, it's still in its nascent stage. We're still developing and finding our way. And I think that the Authors Alliance, it's great because so many of us and so many young people need mentorship and guidance. And the Alliance is the sort of platform that can provide that much needed support and advice, and just sort of, be able to get a hang of how to approach this. We're going to take a very quick break at this juncture. We still have lots more to talk about. Stay with us. Welcome back to the coffee table. We're having a fascinating conversation around World Book Day and what copyrights mean for authors and creatives in Pakistan and around the world. And we're talking to Mehr Hussain and Nida Chaudhary all about it. So one thing that I am now sort of thinking about is that, Nida, you mentioned how a thriving a thriving intellectual scene in a city also leads to economic opportunities. And I know that that UNESCO has got a whole list of creative cities around the world for various creative endeavors. So there's film, there's media, there's gastronomy, there's literature, and happily, Lahore is a creative city for literature. And I think that that is wonderful. And I was reading about it, and Lahore is a creative city for literature because people read a lot. And, you know, apparently we have lots of public libraries. And like you said, you know, we have our book markets. We have a used book industry that is great, and all the kokas full of books. And it seems like it gives us this sense of Lahore being this intellectual city where everybody is reading. And it's just wonderful. But are public libraries as accessible as we think they are? Because I'm basically thinking about access to knowledge and access to books. And this is, again, across language. But like libraries, for example, what's going on?
I think that public libraries in Pakistan, especially in Lahore, I think they need a serious makeover in terms of being places which are more, you know, I think ventilated and well lit, and that, but also because I mean, yes, that's also an issue that our libraries are not modernized, and you know, there's not enough investment, and they're old buildings, and you know, people going to them, and of course they're located in very exclusive, you know, locations as well. So we don't have enough of a very open, and of course, you know, access for women in public spaces in any case is very limited. So that is also a concern. And I feel that, you know, a lot of readers are actually women, and we don't have libraries or public spaces planned enough with a gender lens. So that's also an issue, women being in public spaces and all that. So I think that there is definitely, and of course, if you want to inculcate the love in children also for reading, you need libraries to be welcoming spaces for children as well, because it can't just be, you know, for a certain demographic only. You have to inculcate that sense of reading and love for reading. And I remember that, you know, we used to have the largest book fairs in February, and you know, before the pandemic hit us and all, and even now, you know, the literature festivals that we have, and there's so much conversation and so many other platforms that we have which are promoting writing in their own way. But yes, they're still very much within certain crowds and certain elitist circles, and there is a need to take that to the general public. And that is why I think we need more avenues, and more people-centric avenues, you know, not very exclusive buildings, but more open, accessible spaces which a common man can access more easily. And
I am
you know,
thinking,
for that, of course,
yes, and I think that while some libraries are exclusive, and I think we're thinking of the same ones, but there are public libraries. For example, the Punjab Public Library, which at one point was the largest library in South Asia, like its collection was the largest, and it's just off Mall Road. So, Mehr, do you feel like we don't have a library culture yet that is as developed as it could be? Do you think that maybe that's also an issue here?
Yes, I do believe so. I believe that societal factors come into play here, because we love to interact in our limited circles, and this access to public spaces, there's a stigma associated with it, unfortunately, which of course movements like Aurat March are now trying to address, and of course prior to that, Girls and Dhabas have been trying to address as well. This ultimately comes down to how people view their social activity, whether it falls within the norms of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I think Nida had pointed out that online there are these book clubs that are emerging. There are these book salons that are being hosted in homes, in parks and all, which is a very encouraging thing. Now, the next step beyond this, and of course this is still in development, but the next step would be is to actively encourage children to go into libraries and start sharing that amongst your friends and families. For example, if you are privileged enough to have access to these wonderful libraries, whether it's in private spaces such as the Gymkhana, which has a wonderful library, some of the most finest books are there, or if you go to the Quaid-e-Azam Public Library, which is on the Mall Road, then one should actively share your inside, take photographs of it. You see, digital content is something where a lot of our youth is also based.
Yes.
And if you show pictures, if you actively encourage these sort of activities, then a library culture can be fostered. There is so much that can be done. It's just a matter of taking that first step.
Yes.
And
yes, Nida.
that first step is ultimately comes down to what's in your mind. Fear.
Quite right. Yeah.
Get
I think
rid of that fear, and you've got a whole year.
It's really important to sort of think about libraries and reading and as a social activity. So it's something that you can do. It's entertaining, it's fun. And if libraries were to kind of, like Nida said, revamp their approach and to freshen up their collections and to create spaces that were family friendly and have events there that do sort of pull kids and pull families to them and to sort of, kind of raise their profile, as it were, I'm sure a lot of people would really like doing that. And I think that this could easily be done across class as well and across sort of privilege hesitations as well. Yeah, Nida, you wanted to contribute?
When you talk about buildings and all these public libraries, I feel that access is also hindered because of the class struggle that there is in Pakistan. And I think that is also something that needs to be addressed in the larger, desire to promote the love for reading and to create that kind of equitable access. So I think that, we need to work on this a lot collectively, and which is why I think Authors Alliance is opening its platform to people, any sort of people, if they want to write or express themselves, we will, put it out on our platform, as much as we can. Of course,
yes.
We are not funded. We are not, of course, we're not doing this for money. So we have our own constraints. Yeah. But whatever Facebook pages or whatever, platform that we have created, we want to promote anybody who is into writing and wants to share their work and, support them in any way that we can. And I think more of that is what is required to ensure that there is access to the books and to quality spaces where, as you mentioned as well, that a family-friendly space needs to be created, and that, that it needs to be a trendy space. It needs to be a space where a modern young family would want to be, a part of. And I just wanted to add that the bookstores that we have, some of them like readings, they used to have this coffee nooks in the corner, and that kind of concept as well, where you could just go to the bookshop and sit and have a discussion over a cup of coffee and, with your best book in your hand and all that. So I think very innovative and creative people exist in this country, and they can totally turn this around. And I see that happening, and I'm very encouraged by that trend.
I love that. When we talk about books, I feel like we also kind of almost automatically connect books with fiction and leisure reading and, stories. But books are not just that, because we're looking at nonfiction as well, and we're looking at history, and we're looking at science and social studies and textbooks, and all of these publications are all come together to form a culture of conversation and an intellectual culture. And a great part of World Book Day and the kind of philosophy behind that is a fostering of intellectual freedom and an exchange of knowledge, which can be all kinds of knowledge, isn't it, Mehr? So do you feel like publishers should also be thinking about not just novels, but also texts, for example, and the things that we're reading in school? Because this is how we kind of collectively build an intellectual atmosphere as well.
Absolutely, Mina. I mean, let's think about it. When a child turns 3 or 4, what is their first exposure to books outside of their home? It's in the form of textbooks. Yes. Textbooks that they come across in their academic life. And academic life continues on for 18 years. 18 years is a lifetime. Right? And that's 18 years of exposure to textbook, and especially those at the early age. They're the ones that define what a child's world is going to be like. What they read, what they come across, those are seeds that you're planting in their mind. That is where their choices, their preferences, their likes, their dislikes, their knowledge, their base is formed. So yes, I think publishers should definitely take into consideration the concept of textbooks and take it very seriously, because this is where you are planting seeds for the future. What a child at such an early age, the formative years, is exposed to makes a huge difference in their future. And it's also the first form of reading that they do. It's not as if suddenly they pick up a novel and start reading it. Of course not. They start building towards that on the basis of what they read through their school textbooks.
Yeah.
So I do believe that textbooks are very, very important in terms of shaping a progressive, emancipated, enlightened child, for sure.
Yeah. And I think this is where, well, we were talking about libraries and publishers and booksellers, but I think that the role of schools and teachers is also crucial here, because at any point, and the way I see it is not just elementary school, but also college and also even beyond. I think we all have had inspiring teachers throughout our academic journeys who have really sort of opened our eyes to different ways of thinking, and that was through text. So it's never too late to do it. And Nida, what do you think about that? Sort of the roles of educational institutions in fostering that spirit of intellectual inquiry that World Book Day really encourages?
I think there can be no two ways about it. It's absolutely crucial. Your first interactions with your teachers, how they inspire you not just to, pass the exams, but to dream big and to, dream of a better society. And that society obviously is made up of so many different colors and flavors. So it's not just doctors and engineers and lawyers that you need. You need the culture, you need to have, musicians, you need that, you need poetry, and these are the things that you actually find relief in, when pandemic hit. People went to Netflix or to books, the surge and the demand for these things, for poetry and for music, was people's respite at a time when, they had no access to the outside world.
Yes.
So I think that it's very, very important. And I think that's the moment when people actually realize the importance of artists and writers and, people who make films, because that's when they really realize that, no, this is not just about doing a 9-to-5 job and making money. And, it's life is much more than just economics, right? And as people, as human beings, our soul requires all of these things. Music is food for soul. Reading is and writing is cathartic, for example. So I think it's very, very important to inculcate these values from a very early age, and then not to leave and abandon the children there. Like, for example, I've had my nieces and nephews who've been encouraged to venture into creative writing when they're in their O levels, and then all of a sudden in A levels and then college and then university, reality strikes and they're supposed to abandon their creative passions and pursue something which is more economically sound. So it's really, really unfair to the kids who are so creative. I mean, we can be producing so many more types of people in this society who can add value, so much value, but we're just fixated on those, safe professions that, will earn good money. So, and I think that's why copyrights are even more important, so that children who want to pursue this as a career can actually see that and take it forward beyond O levels and beyond metric and beyond their, initial schooling years. So I think it's very, very important.
Absolutely. And I think absolutely. I think that for a lot of people, having a sensible profession is great. And of course, everybody needs to have a stable income. But the fact is that you can have a creative life alongside that as well. It's not mutually exclusive. And we often forget that when we think of our culture and who we are as people, the arts have an immense role to play in how it has shaped us and our imaginations and our sensibilities over millennia. We are a very ancient culture, and we are one that has always had music, had poetry, had art. And it's something that we should honor and take pride in. And thank you so much, Mehr and Nida, for joining me today and this wonderful conversation. Thank you guys for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't buy pirated anything, and always give credit for whatever artistic work that you share on social media. It's very important. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Coffee Table. Bye now.